Now that Dave Rennie has his coaching staff locked in, one massive question still remains for the All Blacks, and honestly, this could decide what the next era of the All Blacks looks like. Who will be his captain? Because this isn't just about picking the most experienced player anymore. This is about choosing the face of the All Blacks, the leader who carries the pressure, the expectations, and the weight of the entire rugby nation heading towards the next Rugby World Cup. And right now, the debate is already dividing fans. Some people think the captaincy should stay exactly where it is. Others believe New Zealand rugby desperately needs a fresh voice. And then there are the younger stars quietly emerging who could completely change the future of the All Blacks leadership. But stay until the end because I'll reveal who I think Dave Rennie should pick as captain. And trust me, not everyone is going to agree with it. The obvious place to start is Scott Barrett because technically this is still his jersey to lose. Scott Barrett became the All Blacks captain in 2024, and at the time the decision made sense. He already had years of leadership experience with the Crusaders. He was respected inside the squad, and he brought the kind of physical edge coaches love in Test rugby. Barrett is one of those players who sets the standards without needing headlines. He's tough, uncompromising, and completely built for international rugby. But despite all that, the debate around Scott Barrett never really disappeared. But there was also a growing feeling that something didn't fully click. Some analysts questioned whether he was truly the long-term face of New Zealand rugby moving forward. Others believe the All Blacks needed a more emotional leader, someone who naturally inspires people the second they step onto the field. Then came the sabbatical conversations, and suddenly the future became even murkier. Modern rugby has more sabbaticals than normal, but fans immediately started asking the obvious question. Can you really build around a captain long term if the availability becomes uncertain? That's the challenge Dave Rennie now faces because he isn't walking into a clean slate. He's inheriting a leadership group with established senior players already carrying influence inside the squad. And reports have already suggested Rennie wants conversations with senior players before making any major captaincy decision. That alone tells you this isn't straightforward. Changing captains immediately could completely shift the balance inside the team. But while Scott Barrett remains the current leader, there's one player many fans believe should already have the armband, Ardie Savea. The second Ardie's name gets mentioned, fans instantly react because he doesn't just play rugby, he drags teams into fights. Every time the All Blacks are under pressure, every time momentum starts slipping, or every time the intensity rises, Ardie somehow becomes even better. That's why so many supporters believe he should already be the captain. And this isn't just an emotional fan talk either. Ardie Savea was named World Rugby Player of the Year in 2023, placing him among the elite players in the game. He's already captained the side before. He's been part of the leadership group for years, and former players and analysts constantly mention him as a natural captaincy option. What really sets Ardie from everyone else in the way players respond to him. Some captains lead through authority. Ardie leads through pure energy. You watch him play and instantly feel it. He lifts teammates, crowds feed off him, and opponents know they're in for a brutal night the second he gets momentum. That matters because some of the greatest All Black captains weren't necessarily the loudest voices. They were the players everyone naturally followed when pressure arrived. But here's a controversial part. Even with all the support behind him, there are still concerns. Some fans believe giving Ardie the captaincy could overload him physically and mentally because he already carries an enormous workload every single test match. Others wonder whether New Zealand rugby should fully build around someone who has carefully managed his career with overseas opportunities becoming more common in modern rugby. Still, if you ask most fans who feel the most emotional heartbeat of the All Black side, Ardie Savea probably wins comfortably. But there's another name that keeps quietly entering the conversation, Cody Taylor. And honestly, Cody Taylor might be one of the most underrated captaincy candidates in New Zealand rugby right now. Coaches love experienced hookers as leaders because they're involved in almost everything. They control lineouts, work closely with referees, organise forwards, and constantly communicate during games. Cody has been doing that at the highest level for years. He's also hugely respected inside New Zealand rugby. Teammates constantly talk about his professionalism, composure, and leadership around the squad. And unlike some players who lead emotionally, Cody leads through calmness and consistency. He really looks rattled, even in huge pressure moments. That's probably why his name keeps surfacing more and more, whenever fans and analysts discuss realistic captaincy options. There's also the Crusaders factor. New Zealand rugby has historically trusted leaders developed within the Crusaders environments, and Cody Taylor fits that perfectly. He understands winning cultures, pressure, and exactly what the All Blacks environment demands. But while Ardie Savea and Cody Taylor dominate fan discussions, there's another name quietly building serious momentum behind the scenes: Jordie Barrett. A few years ago, nobody seriously talked about Jordie Barrett as a future All Blacks captain. Back then, he was viewed mainly as a freakish talent athlete still trying to fully establish himself at test level. But over the last few seasons, his entire reputation has changed. Now he looks like one of the calmest and most complete players in world rugby. What makes Jordie fascinating in this discussion is how composed he stays under pressure. Whether he's playing fullback, second five, or covering multiple positions, he constantly delivers. Coaches love that reliability because pressure moments define international rugby. His overseas stint with Leinster also seemed to elevate his game even further. Playing a completely different rugby environment gave him more confidence, more maturity, and greater exposure to leadership structures outside New Zealand rugby. He's calm, tactical, measured, and emotionally controlled. Some coaches absolutely love that kind of leadership because it stabilises teams when matches become chaotic. But while most names dominate the conversation, the real interesting debate is about who could eventually take over from this generation. And one name keeps appearing more and more: Cam Roigard. Now, to be clear, Cam Roigard probably isn't becoming All Blacks captain tomorrow. But the fact fans are already discussing him tells you right now how people think of him. Halfbacks have historically made incredible rugby captains because they control games, organise players constantly, and influence almost every attacking decision. Even after battling injuries, Roigard's comeback performances instantly reminded everyone why people are so excited about him. His speed around the breakdown, confidence under pressure, and ability to completely change momentum stand out every time he plays. But what really catches attention is his composure. For a relatively young player, Roigard already looks incredibly comfortable at test level, and that's rare. And then there's Will Jordan. Right now, Will Jordan is already one of the biggest stars in world rugby. His try-scoring numbers are ridiculous. Defenders panic whenever he touches the ball. That completely change games. Traditionally, outside backs rarely become long-term All Blacks captains because New Zealand rugby usually leans on forwards or halfbacks. But Will Jordan might be different because everything around him screams professionalism. Coaches and players constantly praise his preparation, composure, and consistency. But after all the debate, all the arguments, and all the different options, who do I think Dave Rennie should pick as All Blacks captain? For me, it has to be Ardie Savea. Not just because Scott Barrett has failed as captain, and it's not because Cody Taylor, Jordie Barrett, Cam Roigard, or even Will Jordan couldn't become an outstanding leader themselves. It's because Ardie already feels like the captain of the All Blacks side. When the All Blacks need energy, he delivers. When the pressure rises, he responds. When games become brutal and chaotic, he steps forward instead of disappearing. But now the question goes to you. Who would you pick as the All Blacks captain? Would you stick with Scott Barrett, hand it to Ardie Savea, or gamble on the future with players like Cody Taylor, Jordie Barrett, or Cam Roigard? Let me know in your comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share and subscribe for more All Blacks content just like this. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time. Peace!